All right, so good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for joining this presentation entitled WHEDA Housing Tax Credit Overview. This presentation is part of the Village of Shorewood's educational series called The Role of Suburbs in Creating a Diverse and Inclusive Region, Spotlight on Housing. This series has been led by the Village of Shorewood's Community Development Authority and has been ongoing since 2021 when the Village of Shorewood extended TID 1 for purposes of benefiting affordable housing. More information on the previous sessions is available on the CDA's webpage on the Village website at www.villageofshorewood.org. My name is Bart Griepentrog, and I'm the Planning and Development Director for the Village of Shorewood. John, if you want to go to the next slide, perhaps, just a little brief intro here. I'd like to remind everyone that this is a presentation from WHEDA and that attendees are view only for this session. This event is being recorded and will be uploaded to the educational series website for future reference. If you have any questions that you would like to have answered, you may email those to me or Village Manager Ewald, and we'll have a slide at the end of the presentation to remind you of those contact details. The Village has invited WHEDA to present information on housing tax credits because, as many of you know, a project in Shorewood was recently awarded such tax credits, and the Village has received several questions related to how the program works. This presentation does not directly relate to the project in Shorewood, but as a matter of reference, on June 3rd, 2026, Governor Evers announced that Spurl Commercial LLC was awarded WHEDA tax credits to create 19 units of affordable housing at 4448 through 4450 North Oakland Avenue. This site and several others was solicited by the Village Board to developers for an affordable housing project via a request for proposals back in 2024. All projects that were submitted received feedback from the Village Board and CDA, after which developers were informed of the Village's TID policy and how to request funding and/or the utilization of affordable housing funds from that extension fund, if they chose to proceed. Spurl Commercial LLC submitted Phase 1 and Phase 2 applications for the affordable housing funding, which received recommendations from the CDA and approval from the Village Board on March 16, 2026. The Village's sale of the property was contingent upon the developer obtaining WHEDA tax credits and remains contingent upon receiving additional funding and an approved development agreement from the Village. With this background, I'd like to introduce John Searles, WHEDA's Community and Economic Development Director, to provide an introduction to WHEDA and the history and structure of its tax credit program. John?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bart. It's great to be here with all of you. And I'd just like to thank Rebecca and Bart and the Village for the opportunity to come talk to you about the housing tax credit program. Interestingly, as a housing finance agency, this program is probably what we're best known for, even though WHEDA does a lot of different things. So, for those of you who may not be familiar with us, WHEDA stands for the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority. We've been providing low-cost financing for housing and small business development for about 50 years. Every housing finance agency across the country is set up a little bit differently. Here in Wisconsin, we're what's called a quasi-state agency, where we're overseen by an appointed board of directors. And although we collaborate with legislators, we're not actually overseen by the legislature directly. The other thing that may be interesting is that we fund our operations through fees and investments. And although sometimes we're hired by the state to manage funds on their behalf, we actually don't take any tax dollars for our operations. Our CEO is Elmer Moore. He's actually based in the Milwaukee metropolitan area, and he's appointed by the governor, as is his deputy. So ultimately, our structure leads to a strong element of bipartisanship in all that we do. And I think this is also primarily driven by the overwhelming need for affordable housing in all corners of the state. I should also mention we finance both single family housing and multifamily housing, and we're hired by HUD at the federal level to service their portfolio on their behalf. Kind of the key differentiator for WHEDA versus other agencies that are out there is there must be an affordable component in all projects in which we invest. So it doesn't need to be 100% affordable. In fact, most of them are not, but there needs to be an affordable component in order for us to invest. So this next slide, this is a really simple look at the problem that we aim to solve. According to the Counties Association for the state, there's a need for 123,000 affordable homes across the state. So that's roughly the size of Green Bay and its suburbs. On the upside, we are making some progress here. When I gave this talk a year ago, we were over 126,000. But you can see there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So shifting to the rental housing side of WHEDA, there's really two main business lines that fund rental housing. There's multifamily debt financing, which are simply loans, and then what I'm going to be focusing on today, which is the housing tax credit program. So I wanted to provide you all with a little bit of history on this program because it's a pretty interesting one. Um, the housing tax credit was created in response to the reality that the private market alone simply is not able to build quality affordable housing. Affordable rents simply don't pencil out without some kind of government incentive. I think what's interesting about this particular program is it represents a very different approach to providing housing for lower income individuals. In particular, public housing that was built back in the 1960s and the 1970s, decades ago by design. Public housing was cut off from opportunity. It tended to isolate people in poverty and exacerbated long-standing equity issues. So if you think about the Cabrini Greens in Chicago, the Lafitte public housing development in New Orleans, it was literally built on the other side of the freeway from jobs in downtown, or even Hunters Point in San Francisco, which was literally built on a peninsula to isolate folks there. Um, I think what we're up against today is this sort of lack of inclusion and stigma that's attached to housing that we're fighting because we didn't do it very well for a while. So 1986, through a bipartisan effort, they created this program, and it was signed into law by President Reagan. So the housing tax credit is a very different model, which I'm going to be talking to you about today. It is responsible for building and preserving nearly all affordable housing in the country, including in Wisconsin. And it is today serving working families, seniors and veterans, and people with disabilities, about 9.6 million people across the country. So locally, just to give you a little bit of a sense of scale, WHEDA allocates is the sole allocator of housing tax credits in our state. We've provided about $84 million in federal and state credits. We actually just announced a couple of weeks ago the awards that we're making for this year, as Bart alluded to. There was one right in Shorewood. So that's going to fund approximately 40 apartment communities across the state. And since WHEDA started allocating tax credits, we've provided about 644 million to support developments across the state. You may hear from time to time about different percentages attached to them, so 9% or 4% tax credits. So I'm going to actually start on the left side of the slide with the federal 9% program. It is the most competitive program that we have. So we receive about twice as many applications as we have credits to award. And we provide about 16.4 million in competitive 9% allocations per year. We actually just closed the competitive cycle, and it was a highly, highly competitive one. And the reason why it's so competitive is that it generates the most amount of equity to support affordable housing development. In the center of the slide, you'll see the federal 4%. This is also often called the non-competitive program. And in this instance, if you are a developer and you underwrite a project to the non-competitive 4% program, you have good certainty that you will receive an award from us if you meet a minimum score. And I like to say, at least in our state, you have a pretty good sense of how you're doing because we're very transparent about the scoring categories that we have and whether or not your project would do well in a highly competitive process. For the non-competitive, as long as we have enough tax exempted bond volume cap, which is what funds this, you'll have some good certainty that your project will get funded. The only downside of this is it doesn't generate as much equity as the 9% program. There's a correlation between 9% and 4% and the amount of equity that you would receive. But it is a really good choice for especially mixed income deals or multifamily deals where that are located in markets with strong rents to kind of offset the affordable component. And on the right side, our legislature made a move a few years ago to create a state 4% program. So the state 4% is paired with the federal 4%. So when you combine the two, it's called the federal and state 4% program. It's generating about as much equity or cash into a project as the federal 9%. It's also a competitive program and it runs concurrently with the federal 9% program. So that's both awards for the federal and state program, the 9% program, were recently announced by WHEDA, and we have about $7 million available under the state 4% program. So what's interesting is the state allocation is tied directly to our state's population. So um, our state population is almost exactly the same as the state of Colorado. So we have the same amount of tax credits to award as our colleagues over in Colorado. A little bit more about how it works. So after WHEDA receives an allocation of credits from the feds based on our population size, we award credits based on the affordable housing priorities that are spelled out in something called the Qualified Allocation Plan. And I'm going to go into that plan just a little bit later in this presentation. It's an important document for us because it guides our investment activity. So developers read that really carefully. It helps with their decision making around where and when to site a project. And when they receive an award from WHEDA, it's it's a it's almost like a tax coupon that they can exchange for cash. So the money that's actually going into affordable housing developments through the housing tax credit program actually comes from private investors. So developers sell the tax credit coupon to investors, and what they receive in return is a 10-year stream of tax credits. It's literally like a tax rebate that they can turn in to Uncle Sam to offset their GAAP net income. And how that tax coupon is sized is based on the eligible costs of building apartment buildings and an equity stake in the development that provides tax benefits such as depreciation. Uh, WHEDA then ensures that the development remains affordable and in compliance to claim and keep the tax credits. In our state, we maintain affordability for 30 years. So the minimum is 15 across the country. We have an additional 15, so that's really 30-year investment in affordable housing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits of this program. I'm going to start with the residents. So they are benefiting from well-designed homes that are affordable, connected to things like good schools, jobs, transportation, and healthcare. Those are really critical scoring criteria for us at WHEDA and something that we look for in deals. Provides them with a safe, stable home that they can use to build the life that they want. So who typically lives in affordable housing? people you may recognize in your community, either seniors if it's in a 55 and over development, or people such as nurses, butchers, teachers, uh, people who work at the local pharmacy. Sometimes when I talk to residents, they work more than one job. But what's critical for them is that their rents are sized so that they're not paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And that's HUD's definition of affordability is 30%. For the developer, as I mentioned earlier, the benefit they're getting is an infusion of private equity into their projects, which allows them to significantly lower their debt load. So what you see on the slide is the direct correlation between the more equity they get into a project and their ability to lower rents, because the less debt, the less rent they need to charge to cover the debt payment. For investors, the benefit is that offset to their federal tax liability. And the benefit for WHEDA is that we're providing homes that are affordable for 30 years. There are a lot of partners involved in affordable housing. You can see them all here on the slide. If you'll just humor me with a sports analogy. So the developer is really like the quarterback, pulling all of the different pieces together. They are truly working with all of the players that you see here on the slide. Sometimes they have relationships with those private investors to come into their deal. Other times they hire an organization called tax credit syndicators. They really bridge the all of the various parties involved in the housing tax credit deal. So syndicators primarily raise money from those private investors and place the money in good projects that meet investor and syndicator requirements. They really hustle and compete to find both the best developers and projects in which to invest. So they're a common partner in these deals. Community leaders are really important. Those are people who are active in the community and support housing in many ways. Sometimes they are faith-based organizations, sometimes they are economic developers. Community leaders could be people in the village council, but they are really, really critical to the success, as are absolutely municipalities. And I'll kind of, when I talk about some of the case studies, show you the way in which municipalities are critical to the success of these deals. For some deals that have wraparound services, there will be service providers that are also part of these. So nonprofits that provide things like job skills training, transportation, sometimes healthcare services are provided on site too. So they're also absolutely critical. So earlier I mentioned the qualified allocation plan. Those are a lot of words, just means it's our investment plan to guide housing tax credit investment. So my team is actually made up of a range of representatives who are embedded in rural, suburban, and urban areas across the state. So, person embedded in Milwaukee is Maria Watts. So she covers Shorewood. She may be familiar to many of you. She's very active in the community. So she receives a lot of feedback oh, Maria's here. Hey, Maria. So she receives a lot of feedback on the housing tax credit program that she then brings back to Madison to inform this plan. So it's located on WHEDA.com, and we actually just launched the updated QAP 2 weeks ago today. So that will guide our investment activity for the next 2 years. So we do both formal and informal listening to guide this plan. And I encourage any of you who would like to comment or have questions on it to please reach out to us. So in addition to the equity that's provided into projects, which through the housing tax credit program ranges from about 45% to 60% or so of the capital stack, Loans and grants usually make up the rest. So one of the things that WHEDA provides is debt financing, usually in combination of housing tax credits, but not exclusively. And so those loans provide funding for pre-development, construction, acquisition of a site, and rehabilitation of existing homes that may need to be spruced up a little bit. And we do this by providing long-term, either variable rate or fixed rate financing. And our loan programs are designed to complement the housing tax credit program. Probably our best known debt is was actually created by the legislature just in 2023, called the legislative loans. Through a very proactive measure, our legislature created very competitive subsidy through allocation of $525 million in loans to us. WHEDA is now lending at a rate of 0% to try to support both housing tax credit and non-tax credit deals across the state. So, what can kind of breathe a little more life into this is by sharing some case studies. You can see really what this looks like on the ground. So, I'll share some workforce and affordable housing deals across the state. These are ones that you'll see have been supported by municipalities, community leaders, economic developers, all of the parties that I shared a little bit earlier. And these reflect commitments, I would say, that most communities in most parts of our state have to help solve our housing challenges. So with that, let's take a look. So this is a new construction development in the city of Green Bay. It was built on a what's called an urban infill site or a green space that the city had prioritized for development, and they had issued an RFP to attract developers to the site. Uh, Actually, this is something that we see a lot is they wanted to repurpose an old big box store that used to be located there. So they tore it down. It was an old Shopko. They tore it down and then created an incentive for a developer to come in. So Gorman and Company, which actually is just based a little bit north of Shorewood in Whitefish Bay, came in. They received a 9% housing tax credit award from WHEDA. And what the city has gotten in return is a really good mix of homes for people at different income levels. So you can see there's some market rate, there's some voucher units. Supportive housing refers to housing for people who were formerly homeless. So it's really truly a mix. Um, and what a lot of developers do is they reach out to prospective residents prior to building to get a sense of what they would like to see in the community. And so what Gorman was selected to do was include an in-unit washer and dryer, which can be a game changer for people once you get that in your home. Storage units, garage parking, and community room. The other players I want to just call out that made this a success. Once again, the city, not just through the RFP, but they have something that they call the TDA funds, which is made up of money from both current TIF that's throwing off cash, tax increment financing, and closed tax increment financing. So they created a pool and also threw in some ARPA money in there, and they use it to help subsidize affordable housing. The AHP subsidy that you see here on the slide was actually provided by the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago. And we are lucky in the Midwest that we have the Federal Home Loan Bank because not all of them have the same offerings. Ours offers something called the AHP subsidy, which once a deal reaches certain benchmarks, it becomes like a grant. It converts to a grant, and it is absolutely vital to supporting projects. It's about $2 million in cash that go into these deals. And then lastly, we'd have provided a permanent loan. So moving on to the Ella. This is a high-profile deal in the city of Madison on East Washington Street. Has an interesting history here. It's actually named after the an iconic deli that used to be located on the site. It closed back in 2018. The old building kind of fell into decay, but a few years later, a developer purchased the site. And I think they really did an excellent job reaching out to the community to ask what they would like to see. So the results, as you see here on the slide, is very Madison, right? They have EV charging stations. It's very pet friendly. There's a dog wash, a meditation room. There's a bike storage facility, and there's commercial space on the ground floor, which is actually fully occupied right now. The other kind of thing that makes this project stand out a little bit is the artwork on the side of the building. They didn't want to just kind of throw up a project. So they hired an artist by the name of Bill Rebholz. Um, he's actually Madison born, lives in Los Angeles now, but he was hired to create this mural. It's actually one of the largest at Madison, and you can see it features colorful animals, birds, some folk art motifs that pay an homage to the deli and a beloved carousel that used to be located on site. So just wanted to call that out because these can be highly tailored to the design of that's requested from the local community. Shifting gears completely, I wanted to show you something that's a little bit different from all of the others. So this is a kind of a classic townhome community that you'll see in more suburban areas, in rural areas across the state. Um, Very often, as I travel around the state, employers will say that the lack of housing is truly a barrier to them being fully employed. So it actually is affecting the employment rate and in the state and their ability to fully operate. So in Darlington, which is a rural part of south central Wisconsin, they wanted to build workforce housing to support the local agricultural economy. So that's very niche and may not seem, cogent to something that Shorewood might need, but I just wanted to share it because sometimes housing is built with the needs of workers specifically in mind. So, so developer came in and constructed this townhome community, and again spoke with the farm workers who would be using the property to design it. So it's 32 total homes, lots of bedrooms to allow for growing families. And the developer was able to tap something called a USDA 514 loan, which is specifically designed for off-farm labor housing for year-round and migrant or seasonal domestic farm workers. So for WHEDA's part, we provided a $429,000 annual credit, which equates to about $4 million, give or take, depending on the pricing for the tax credit to make this project a success. So coming up just on the half an hour, but that was the presentation that I had for you today. Uh, really thrilled to be able to be here to talk a little bit about it. Um, Super eager to engage with any of you who want to talk a little bit more about the tax credit program or anything that WHEDA has to offer. And thank you again to Bart and to Rebecca for the invitation to come speak with you today.
Yeah, thanks, John. Great overview of WHEDA and its services. If you could advance, I think somewhere perhaps a little further down there is a slide with Rebecca and I's email address on there. If not, my email address is bgriepentrog at shorewoodwi.gov, and Rebecca Ewald is rewald at shorewoodwi.gov. I do think that might be a later slide, John, or maybe not. Maybe it got cut from, yeah, if it's,
Oh, there we go.
yeah, I think there were some extra ones that were in there. Here we go. So perfect. So yeah, once again, thanks, John. Thanks everyone for attending. If you live on the call or later in a recording have questions on this, feel free to email both Rebecca and I, and we can, research the answer and get back to you. So, great presentation. Thanks everyone for attending, and have a good day.
So much.